So show of hands in here, who's used Uber before? I guess who hasn't used Uber before? All right, cool. So we'll do a quick introduction to what Uber is so everyone knows what's going on, and then we'll talk about a bunch of cool things today. Hopefully the purpose of this, or what you get out of this, is that you can rethink the way that you do partnerships in your community. So I'm going to show some examples of the things that we do that you're going to say, wow, we don't have those capabilities or we don't have those partners in our community, but the point here is no matter how big or small you're thinking, you can apply a new lens to what you're doing. You can think outside the box to better your team, your members, your community, and everything else going on. So a bit about me. I was a swimmer for 15 years or so. That's very young Marshall on the right. I don't actually have any memories that predate my swimming career, so if I think back to the earliest memories that I have, swimming is a part of that. It's a foundational element of me. I kind of give a lot of where I am today to the sport of swimming and the work ethic that it kind of instilled in me, and the coaches that have raised me to that know that I feel that way. But graduate of Miami of Ohio, moved to San Francisco 4.5 years ago, and have been working at Uber ever since. So the Uber story, for those that are not familiar, Uber is a ride-sharing platform. Basically was created because two guys were in Paris and realized that it's really difficult to get a taxi in Paris. And they're like, wait, it's actually really difficult to get a taxi in San Francisco as well. So they said, how do we fix that? And the original idea was, well, there's this thing called a black car livery business that's super inefficient. If you've ever used a livery service, they pick you up, they take you where you're going, they drop you off, they wait for you to finish, then they pick you up and take you back to the airport or wherever you were. So what they said was, how do we make an app that kind of utilizes that downtime? So a driver could continue on his normal business, but then give rides on demand to people who wanted it and make extra money and allow other people to have access to those cars. Well, it's grown a lot from there. So when I started at Uber in January of 2013, there was 150 people at the company. We were in about 20 cities around the world, and the business was very small. Today, we're in over 600 cities. Over 70 countries. We're giving billions of rides a year, and we have over 50 million monthly active users. The company is also around 15,000 people now, so it's grown dramatically. This is a really good shot of Uber on New Year's Eve in 2011. Everyone was going crazy because we had like 7 concurrent rides going. People were like, oh my God, we have the greatest idea that's ever been created. There's 7 people who are moving around San Francisco with this app. This is great. And this is San Francisco like 2 years ago. So you can see you can't even tell the difference between a single car and the map. This just shows how big it's grown in the last couple of years. At this point, over 75% of Americans are able to get an Uber within 10 minutes or less. We have a lot of different products. So anything from UberX, which is your cheaper than a taxi ride alternative, to Uber Black, which is your traditional black car luxury experience, to things like Uber Eats, which is our food delivery service. So in cities, you're able to actually have meals delivered to you. Uber Rush, which is our product that delivers goods. So if you order from a store in Manhattan, you can actually get it delivered to you in 10 minutes or less via Uber. And then a recently launched product that's interesting to this group called Uber Teen, which allows teenagers between the age of 13 to 17 to use Uber with the permission of their parents. It's a whole different app experience. We're piloting that in Columbus, Phoenix, and Seattle. But the joke that I always made to the team that's been building that is, wow, I would have loved this when I was a swimmer because my parents didn't want to wake up at 5 in the morning and drive me to practice. I could have just taken an Uber, and now I could. So to dive into partnerships at Uber, I'll talk about why we do partnerships, what we get out of them, show you some examples of the things that we're doing, just to kind of set the tone for how we approach these. And then we'll dive into, well, okay, again, I don't have these available to me, but how do I rethink my strategy when you guys are talking to partners? Because really all it is about creating value for people and approaching things differently than a sponsorship. You know, we do a lot of sponsorship activities. We work with teams, we work with leagues, we work with athletes, all those sorts of things. But at the same time, we approach them as partnerships so that we're driving value for them, they're driving value for us, so we're not just writing a check. And if you think about it that way, you can actually unlock a lot more potential because there's a lot of people that you talk to that are willing to write a check and sponsor something. There's a lot of people who aren't willing to write a check without a lot of clear value being driven to them. So the point of this is to how do you think about what you have available to you, what your club can do for these people in the community, and then how you can get value from that. So why we do partnerships? A lot of reasons. we're trying to surprise and delight our customers. So our customers are riders and drivers. It's a two-sided marketplace. So we think of both of them as our customers. So we're trying to do things that, up-level their experience all the time, whether that be they get in a car on their way to an NFL game and there's a former player from that team who rides along with them, so delivering ice cream and kittens in the summer, and everything in between. We're also trying to really drastically improve the Uber experience at events. So some people don't realize this. When I say I work at sports at Uber, they're like, what does that mean? Uber's just a way for you to get around the city. What is sports and how does that fit into that? But if you think about it, if you've ever used Uber to get to a sporting event, it's usually quite challenging. Venues are not made for Uber. They're made for people who are driving, they're made for taking public transit, and they're made for taking your traditional taxi service. So something that we're working a lot on the last couple of years is how do we make sure that no matter where you're going, no matter what venue you're going to, we're able to improve that experience for you. Also, just creating positive PR for the business. A lot of the things that we do don't necessarily drive massive, massive impact on our top line business, but what they do is create really positive headlines for what Uber's doing, and it helps us tell our story more effectively. A lot of the times the press is focused on regulatory matters, sensitive government issues, things that aren't really fun to read about to the average customer. So what we're doing is creating reasons for people to pick up and read an article about Uber that's shedding a positive light. Also, we're launching new products all the time, Uber Teen being one of them, Uber Eats recently being another one. We use partners to help launch those. It's hard for us to break through the noise of our core business when we're launching all these subsequent things. So if we're able to use partners to help tell that story, then it creates more value for everybody. Also, trying to get our customers to take or to give more rides. That's the most important part of our business. So through a lot of these things that we do with our partners, it's trying to give people a new reason to take a ride or a new reason to give a ride or to take more. On the right here is a great example. If you've seen the movie Zootopia that came out last year, you maybe saw that Uber was integrated into it. We were one of the first brands to ever be integrated into a Disney animated film. But what we did was we allowed people all over the world to put a promo code in and turn all the icons in their Uber app into the animal versions of these cars. So you had like the zebra-looking Uber car, you had the mouse-looking Uber car, and it's just a fun, easy integration to do that kind of sheds or grows the Zootopia brand into our app for tens of millions of people around the world to see. And obviously, we were integrated into a film that was very successful. A couple other fun examples. Again, these are things that are just kind of showing the way that we think outside the box. But take the Transformers film. Paramount calls us and says, hey, we want to find a way to partner. We want to do this and that. What do you think is interesting? And the most interesting thing to us at the time was, well, how do we take the Optimus Prime truck that actually gives, that's in the movie, the prop from the film, and give rides in it? It was actually not a street legal vehicle. We got it street legal, and we drove it around Dallas, Phoenix, and Los Angeles and gave people rides. The thing sang the theme song of Transformers. It talked to you with the actual voice from the film, and we took it to Make-A-Wish Foundation events. We took it around and just drove it around these cities to build awareness. But when something like this that was thrown together in a couple of weeks drives over 350 million earned media impressions, so 350 million people seeing this in the press, over 43 million Twitter impressions, 200 plus articles written about it, it's just all positive. For something that cost nobody any money and was just reusing stuff that was already in existence, you're able to create all this value for both Paramount and for Uber. Another one. So at the Super Bowl, the last two Super Bowls, they've been the first two that you can actually take an Uber to. In San Francisco is the first time you ever were able to take an Uber to the Super Bowl, or to the big game, sorry. The previous year in New York, you weren't actually allowed, or when it was in New York in 2014, you were actually not allowed to take Uber to the game. It was like a restriction they made. You could only take the buses they had, have a parking pass, or take public transit. And it was kind of a disaster. So we work closely with the Super Bowl host committees now, and 15% of the game took a ride home. But we had this massive lounge experience. We created a help desk area, water and charging stations. We had music going to kind of make the experience after the game not be, I'm standing in a parking lot holding my phone waiting to find my car, because that's not good for the customer. I just came from the Super Bowl. It was awesome. I want a good experience. So the average pickup time was 12 minutes, which drastically improved the experience for not just riders, but for drivers. And this is something that we've continued to kind of build on at every major event. So if you go to the Super Bowl, to the College Football Championship, to USA Swimming Olympic Trials, no matter where you go, there's going to be some sort of Uber experience to make that better for you. And that's a foundation of kind of our partnership deal making at this time. Another one, this is kind of a random thing that we did, not thinking it was going to blow up the way that it did, but we partnered with Britney Spears, who everyone is probably familiar with, to launch a single that she came out with a couple years ago. So we had 20 cars outfitted in this branding that the label paid for, and we had the song playing on repeat in these cars before it was available anywhere else. And you could request these cars and get a ride and listen to the song. And we had a couple, maybe 100 people were able to actually do this, but it blew up on social media. It blew up in Brazil on social media, kind of inexplicably, and drove over 1 billion earned media impressions for something that like nobody could say was bad. And those are the things where you almost think you're doing something that's just a fun promotion in a single city that all of a sudden becomes very interesting on a global scale or a national scale and drives a ton of value. So that all said, how do I apply that thinking to what you guys are doing? Or how do you guys apply that thinking to what you're doing? Not everybody has Britney Spears available to release a single. So one thing that you can do is take a different approach. You know, when we work with partners, we don't walk in and say, hey, show me what you do with everybody else. Give me your rate card for what you're doing. Kind of give me the assets that you have available to you. We say, throw everything you've done out the window. We're not interested in any of that. We're interested in pushing the envelope and doing things that are actually going to change our business and are going to push or change the game in sports sponsorship to begin with. So let's take the Golden State Warriors, who are a great partner of ours. Most companies who partner with the Warriors are looking for the same kind of set of stuff. They're putting their logo on in-venue signage. You know, they're sponsoring the foam finger night, so their logo's on the foam finger. You know, they're adding the official mattress of the Golden State Warriors or the official dentist of the Golden State Warriors to their existing marketing collateral without really thinking how that matters or makes sense to them. And then maybe they're putting some branding on their homepage. So we go to the Warriors and say, hey, we want to create a partnership with you guys that's more than just a sponsorship that's covering all these different bases. You know, what can we do here? And after a lot of going back and forth and a lot of pushing them to think outside the box, we kind of landed at a couple of foundational elements. So one is drastically improving the ride experience at Oracle Arena. I talked about that a bit earlier. You know, Oracle Arena in Oakland is an example of a venue that's really, really difficult to use an Uber. It sometimes took you an hour to get out. And oftentimes you just give up. And then you would walk to BART and take public transit or have to have somebody pick you up. It wasn't an optimal experience for our drivers either, who would come out there thinking they're going to get a trip back to San Francisco. Then they wait an hour and nothing happens. So we drastically improved this experience. But then we also said, okay, how do we engage with our partner drivers, you know, the core of our business, the lifeblood of our business? So this is actually kind of where we created this really amazing program for our drivers that is now a key component of all of our sports partnerships called the Uber MVP program. So what we do is we allow riders to nominate drivers once a trip is completed. So if you take a great Uber ride, you're like, Jill was amazing. She helped me get to the airport on time to catch a flight to go on vacation. Without her, I would have missed the flight, yada, yada, yada. Jill was a hashtag Uber MVP. So then that flags her in our system and adds her to this pool of drivers in whichever city that she's in that can win these experiences from sports teams. So in the case of the Warriors, what we say is 100 drivers get picked over the course of the season. They get a signed certificate from Steve Kerr, the coach of the Warriors, that says, you know, thanks for being a great Uber partner. Thanks for supporting the Oakland community. We want to honor you. They get a T-shirt. We bring them all to a Warriors game. They get to shoot free throws on the court after the game is over. It's a great experience for them. And that's something that a lot of companies, especially in this on-demand economy, don't think about all the time. They're usually focusing on how do we get more customers on one side of their marketplace. They're not thinking about how they engage with the other half. You know, without the drivers, there is no Uber. Without, you know, the delivery people, there's no Postmates, there's no Seamless, there's no any of these new on-demand economies that have been created. Those don't exist. This is a really good example of something that came out of the Uber MVP program, where the Warriors and us kind of just built this on our own. But the gentleman sitting in the white polo shirt you can see is an Uber partner of ours. His name is John. John runs a basketball team in Oakland for at-risk kids that don't have the money to pay for your traditional travel teams. And he drives Uber to make the money to take the team to games around the region, to pay for the uniforms, to pay for practice time, all that sort of stuff. So we hear this story because it kind of came bubbled up through Uber employees who had ridden with him. And we told the Warriors, like, hey, we have this coach. He's doing amazing things in the community. How do we support him? And what we did was we actually had Zaza Pachulia, the starting center for the Warriors, surprise the kids at their practice. He went to one of their games. He helped coach them. He gave them tickets to the Warriors-Cleveland Cavaliers game. He invited them all as guests of him. And you had this amazing experience for a bunch of kids that don't really get this sort of thing every day. And this is an example of how you can just think through not the traditional marketing assets, but stuff that really matters and really changes the game, not just for one of your brands, but for the community as a whole. It's not something that was in the contract or the deal we have with the Warriors. It's one of those things that we were both believing in how we can support the community in partnership with each other, and this is what came out of that. The other thing that we look at with them is how do we use the Uber platform to engage with fans. So that's a pretty broad statement, and the Warriors' business changes a lot. They sign new players like Kevin Durant. They go to the finals. They win the finals. They lose the finals. You don't know. But how do we use our platform to help them engage with their fans? So oftentimes, in sponsorship, you say, I'm the partner, I'm going to write a check, the team is going to give me a bunch of stuff, and that's where the transaction kind of ends. In this case, we say, hey, we have this platform that's great for you as well. How do we use this for you? What can we do to accomplish your business objectives? And oftentimes, they struggle to grasp that. But at its core, Uber is an experiential marketing platform that connects people with experiences and brings people to experiences, and you can apply that to a lot of things. So in your case, you have a club, you have members, you have meets, you have parents, you have other events, you have a lot at your disposal, and you can think about how you apply those to your partnerships versus just putting a logo on a sign. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but there's partners that you're not able to tap in your community because they're looking for more. And this is just an example of a way that you can kind of create that value when you're able to align on principle with your partners. Another thing that's important is really understanding each other. And I'll use the USA Swimming as an example of that. This is where Matt and I first connected around the trials last year. And we wanted to partner with USA Swimming and have an activation presence in Omaha. And this is what came out of that. But a lot of the times we'll talk to partners that are not used to working with us, and they really struggle to understand what we're doing. But Matt's team was amazing. And, they really listened to what we said. They turned that into things that mattered for us. They didn't try to sell us the stuff that was coming that every other brand or every other partner was asking for. They really created some of these things knowing exactly what was important to us. So things like we really needed space to communicate where people can get their Uber to pick them up. We had a ride-sharing zone right there. Some of you maybe saw it. But they gave us space in the Aqua Zone right next to the entrance and exit where our brand ambassadors could talk to people without having to roam about or find where people were going. Everyone was kind of coming in and out of one spot. We were right there primed to kind of communicate this to them. The other one is that Omaha wasn't a big market for Uber. That probably isn't surprising, but some of these cities just aren't huge for us. So how do we build awareness that Uber is a great way to get to the trials? Oftentimes we say that and they're like, well, we'll tweet about you, we'll put signage up, we'll put it in an email communication. But those things get lost in the shuffle. People don't read all that stuff. The average fan isn't necessarily reading through every email. But what they do is they listen to influencers. So how do we take influencers as a way to share that message? So what USA Swimming did was they got us a bunch of athletes and other influencers in the swimming space to tweet about how they were using Uber to get to the trials. Because when you see a big-time celebrity in the sport that you're watching or you're attending talk about something that they're doing as a way to get there, that kind of makes you think about, hey, well, maybe I can take that. There's some aspiration there. People, especially that follow them on Twitter, are like, if Garrett Weber-Gale is going to take an Uber to swimming trials, why am I not? I want to do the same thing he's doing. But that's something that's often a miss. The other one is, how do we use the USA Swimming platform and the trials platform to engage with our riders and drivers in Omaha? So what they did was they gave us tickets to multiple sessions that we could give away to drivers as like a thank you. We could give away to fans as a experiential activation. But they're like, hey, here's these tickets. We understand that you have a lot of different needs. You use these how you want. We'll give you more if you need them. We'll give you less if you don't need them. But this was a really easy partnership to put together because we came to the table. We're very clear about what's important to us. And Matt and his team were able to deliver on that with ease. But the problem is if they would have come back and said, here's all these things we want to do that was out of touch with what we'd asked for, well, then it's harder to get something done. Maybe wouldn't have been as interested in partnering. Maybe we wouldn't have been as incentivized to do that deal. If you're the brand that's not able to provide that value for a partner, you might lose out on some money. Another thing that's really important is how you grow with your partners. Someone mentioned they have had a partner for their club for 35 years, which is incredible. I wonder if you've continued to evolve that partnership over time as your business changes, as your goals change, and as theirs do as well. So the NFL Players Association was one of our very first sports partners. And a lot of people are like, how does Uber partner with NFL Players Association? Those guys have enough money, they don't need rides. But if you're familiar with the NFL and the problems they've had over the last couple of years, in the 2012-2013 season, they had 22 vehicle-related incidents, either DUIs, car accidents, arrests, things that were bad that happened in a car. And we saw this, and they reached out to us to sponsor a random event that they were doing. And we're like, hey, that's interesting. We could write a check and we could walk away, and it's just an easy transaction. But you guys have a serious problem. I mean, you have this drunk driving issue amongst players. They're not utilizing the transportation options you give them. How do we use Uber as a way to try to fix that? So what we did was we created a partnership all around player safety. We provided every player an allotment of rides to get them to start to use Uber. We gave them messaging that talked about how safe and reliable Uber was. Also, a big issue for them was they didn't want the teams knowing where they were going, and the existing infrastructure in place kind of allowed the teams to track that. Ubers are a secure and kind of private option for you to get around. So what we did was we kind of painted this picture. We created all these communications. We worked with the player ambassadors who talked to all of them and tried to just make the league more safe. These are high-profile individuals in their community. If they're making better decisions, then fans make better decisions, and everybody goes home for the better. But that said, once you get through 1 year of that, that's not always their main business objective. The players become more safe, the program takes off. Well, what do we do in year two? Well, then by year two, if you have followed the Uber story, we're in a large regulatory battle across the United States, trying to pass pro-rideshare regulation in communities, not just in the US, but all over the world. Well, what we did was we said, hey, NFLPA, how do you guys help us now? How do you help us tell this story? So what we did was we actually had players, NFL players from communities, go to hearings about Uber. They would literally go to Town Hall, City Council, sit there, and then speak about how Uber has changed their life, made their lives safer, is important from a community's perspective because they need it there. You had Drew Brees tweeting directly at city council members in New Orleans about how UberX was really a reliable option. And that was something that allowed us to bring that product into the city to serve that community. That's a weird way to think about how you can partner with somebody because it's a bit abnormal. But then over time, we got through that issue. So then you go into year three and you're like, well, okay, now how do we grow these smaller markets that we're operating in? The San Francisco's, New York, Chicago's, DC's, those cities don't really need us to do anything special from a marketing perspective. But how do we help the local communities? How do we give players the ability to work with their existing partners through the Uber platform? So the focus shifted to that. And then in year four, it's really now shifted to driver engagement. So we've identified partner drivers who are active in the football space, either coaching, training, playing amateur football, those sorts of things. We surprise them with players from teams in their local city to thank them for supporting their community. We had a coach for a youth football team who Calais Campbell from the the Arizona Cardinals surprised. You have a trainer who trains athletes in inner city communities to get a college scholarship. All these sorts of things. So this is just an example of how you can have a partner come in for one thing, and maybe the year one's really successful, but they're like, hey, yeah, I kind of got the most out of that. Let's go our separate ways. But if you want to get them to renew, you have to find ways to grow with them. And some of that is just asking questions. Some of that is figuring out, okay, here's the challenges that you have or had in the past. Here's the challenges that you have now. Tell us how we can help you more. We'll create something that is beneficial for you. It's not really it shouldn't be a transaction. I think if there's anything I can convey here, it's that you're able to change what you're providing them on a given year. And your partners are going to expect that if you want them to continue to be partners. And if you're able to do that, you're able to drive a lot more value for your club. And then some pitfalls. We work with 80+ sports teams in the US. We work with probably have 100+ partners in the sports space globally. We've seen a lot of things. And no matter how big or small those opportunities are, there's still things you want to avoid doing. I think number one is just showing that you understand your partner's business objectives. If you walk into a meeting and you're trying to get someone to write you a check and you can't convey that you understand their business or understand what they need and how they tick, you're not really showing that you're interested in them for anything more than a check. Again, not sponsorship, we're talking partnership here. Also, if you're making a pitch on something that you want a partner to do, a sponsorship asset that you want to sell, an idea you have for someone in your community, if it sounds bad to you or it doesn't really make sense to you, it's going to sound a lot worse to your partner. So I think one thing that's important is making sure that you're able to figure out or come up with things that make sense, that are logical, that you could talk to your other coaches about and say, hey, do we think X, Y, and Z partner is going to be interested in this? And if everyone's like, yeah, that makes total sense, they're probably going to be. But if everyone's shaking their head like, I don't really know about that, their partner's not going to understand it either. The other one is thinking outside the box. The creativity goes a long way. If you can show your partner that, hey, you've thought this through, you've come up with some things that are outside the box, that you're not seeing other clubs, other teams in your community doing, that's a big thing to hit home. I mean, I was thinking about this last night. I don't think there's another youth sport that combines as many age or demographics at one time as swimming does. You talk about a swim meet, you have people of all ages, from all backgrounds in one place at the same time. Any other youth sport, youth football, youth soccer, youth baseball, it's either like boys or girls, older kids, younger kids. You don't really have them all in the same place at the same time. That's a super valuable value proposition for partners in your community. It's a one-stop shop for them to talk to a lot of different types of people who they may have, they may be hunting for those demographics. So don't think that you're limited to just kind of pitching partners on one thing. You have this broad demographic base, and some people have talked about tapping into Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as a way to understand your demographics. But you also know just kind of anecdotally. And that's something you don't want to leave from a pitch. You want to make sure that your partners understand that they understand who they're going to get in front of. The other thing is, and this happens more than you'd think, is don't send partners something that they can easily tell was created for their competitor as well. So if you're trying to get an orthodontist to sponsor your club, and there's 2 prominent orthodontists in your community, and you send them something that has a logo of the other orthodontist, or mentions the other orthodontist, or clearly it was a copy-paste error, that's a bad look on you. And it happens to us all the time. We'll see a deck come through and it has our competitor's logo on it, or it references something that we did that actually our competitor did, and you kind of know that they really don't care about you as a partner. They care about you as a check, and it's less interesting for us to want to move forward. So going back to that point of sponsorship allows you to access a lot of things. Partnership allows you to access everything, because not everyone's looking to write a check, but everyone's looking to drive value for their business and potentially yours as well. It's not just about money. The last point is celebrate your wins. If you knock it out of the park for a partner, and if you do something really meaningful and you're able to show those examples, not just a, hey, here's this cool thing we did, but hey, here's this cool thing we did and here's what it did for that partner, that's something you want to use. We want to see that. That's something that if you're able to show that whatever you're doing at a swim meet has worked for the local pizza company, the orthodontist, the local bank, and has drove results for them, you want to be able to tell that story, because without that, it's all still an idea. But if you say, hey, this thing that we've come up with that you might not understand on paper, this is actually what it did for another partner, it's a lot more meaningful for us, us being the partner on the other side of the table. So really, the point of all of this is the way that you approach a partnership or approach a sponsorship, it shouldn't just be about a check. If you're only looking for money, you're going to leave a lot of value on the table. If you're able to create this concept of in-kind trade, which is anything that isn't dollars, then you can access things that you never even thought imaginable, no matter how large or small that is.